My name is David.
And my name is Jason.
And this is Discern Realities, a Dungeon World podcast.
Our first segment is what happened here recently. So, listeners, I am joined this afternoon by Fraser Simons, the author of the Veil RPG and Young at Heart, a sports drama story game. I thought it would be fun just to have him on to see what he's been up to in gaming. Actually, we're going to talk about a game that he and I are both in. So, but anyway, Fraser, welcome to DR.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, this is an honor.
I like to honor people, so that's awesome. Okay, well, so all right, let's talk about. So you wanted to talk about Scenic Dunnsmouth, right? Which is the World of Dungeons series that I'm running right now for Gauntlet Hangouts, and I've mentioned it briefly, maybe an episode or two ago. But what do you want to talk about specifically? I
just really like how unusual it is, right? Like right from the get-go. I wasn't sure what to expect because I've never even heard of the module because I don't run in those circles. So I was like, remember I was even like, what's Scenic Dunnsmouth or something like that? And they're like, that's not what it's called.
Yeah, I mean, I think, we kind of probably share that in the sense that I purchase lots of OSR stuff and I read lots of OSR stuff and I actually run a lot of OSR stuff also, but it's not really like my scene, if that makes any sense, you know? Like I don't really know people in the OSR scene because I'm just so busy, like kind of more on this sort of indie story game side of the ledger, but I like both. So, so you didn't know what to expect, and
it's turned out to be really exciting because slowly the questions that you've been asking us have been like really hitting on unusual things that have made, I think, all the players come up with some really creative stuff going on with their characters that they otherwise wouldn't have, right? Like especially right off the bat with the dream stuff that you were asking us about. Right. We went over tone initially, and I think that helped a lot because everyone's dreams were just messed up, right?
Right, yeah. So just to give the listeners some context, I kicked off that series. So each of the characters is going to Dunnsmouth, this sort of backwater swamp village that doesn't get many visitors. They're going there via ship in order for different reasons. They each are coming there for totally different reasons. And I wanted to explore just kind of get some thoughts going about like the player's initial thinking about their characters by basically having them describe a dream. They each had a dream, a very similar sort of structured dream, and that it was about their past. And they all had it on the same night as they kind of got close to Dunnsmouth, which kind of hinted that like there's some power in Dunnsmouth, right, that kind of affects them. But you're right, like I think that really set the tone, and it really set a lot of things on the table in terms of like what you were each interested in exploring, which was super helpful for me as the GM.
Mm-hmm. And I think it really set in archetypes really well, right? Like one of the characters who's sort of like a mousy guy, his dream was all about like sort of cowardice, basically. And My character, Jurek, is like this sort of amalgamation of like a native tribes and also like a barbarian kind of, and his dream was like out hunting with his father, and then they came upon like this really weird supernatural scene, and then as time went on with this series it's sort of like focused on that and getting even more stranger. So yeah, it's been neat to see where everybody's character has taken it.
Yeah, I think that's been one of the most enjoyable aspects of this series so far. We just did the third session last night, right? And I think it would have been really easy for me to kind of just railroad you guys through this village, right? Like move you from thing to thing to thing, you know? So in case anybody doesn't know, the setting is really, really like kind of low action, very mystery focused, very horror focused. And I think it would have been easy for me to kind of just put the map on the table, so to speak, and say, all right, let's just move to all these places and do adventure, right? Let's do mystery, let's do horror. And I think that would have been easy to do. But what I like is that you guys have really taken this very strange setup. This very, very like this setting. The setting has just so much weird tension in it, and so many like bizarre little like mysteries going on. And what I like is you guys have like really taken ownership of that with your characters, right? Like the way you guys are incorporating your characters into Dunnsmouth's like history and vibe and mythos is really, really cool.
Yeah, it seems like we're sort of like being swallowed by the story, and by the end we'll sort of like have always been in this place, right? Like
right, yeah, exactly.
Like it's one of those. Yeah, I can't even think of like the proper story, but in terms of tone, I feel like it's sort of like Shutter Island. But then in terms of theme, it's like, I don't even know, like it's slowly normalizing everything that is weird, like very strange violence and odd happenings are becoming like, oh, that's just a thing that happens here, and we're okay with it.
It's like de jour, yeah, exactly, yeah. I've noticed that too. So I'm trying to avoid like saying too much about the module and about the setting because I don't want to ruin it for people who haven't played it. But essentially, the long and short of it is that the village has an ancient history. There's a cult in the village, and there's this like object that causes the time. That causes the passage of time to be really fucked up in Dunnsmouth, and it kind of affects like everyone's thinking and their perception of time, right? And so, just right off the bat, the setting is strange and disorienting and disarming, right? Like, my favorite thing that I did yesterday was I would occasionally like just interrupt the scene and say, "Oh, Jurek, there's another person standing there with you guys. You just noticed him, right?" And it had this like kind of like just weird like quality just to kind of like emphasize that like the vibe of the place is just so like it shifts and it's a little unstuck in time, and it feels like you're, a lot of the things you guys have been describing whenever I ask questions is like, how you perceive the time in this place and how some of you perceive it differently, like this is taking forever, and others of you are like perceiving it in a very short period of time. And yeah, you're right, like what I like is like it all started to be very strange and intense and weird, but it's starting to become like, this is just the way it is, and now we're going to pursue our own goals and motivations within this really weird context, and I'm really into it.
Yeah, and I like that for Jurek, he's sort of like, it seems like he's kind of aware that everything's really weird, but nobody else is. And so they're trying to like normalize him, but he's like, no, but like we just pretty much straight up murdered people, right? So that's not good. Like they didn't even attack us at all. Like he literally did nothing, and we killed him. And everyone's like, yeah, but, so now this other weird thing is happening. So let's just go there, right? And Jurek is like, no, what's happening?
Well, one thing, just as a, just kind of before we wrap up this segment, one thing that I really enjoyed about yesterday's segment was, Jurek was the only character who was like a returning character, right? He had been in other World of Dungeons sessions that I'd run. And so he had like a bit of like backstory already compared to everybody else. And I actually think that has had a big effect on how you're playing him and how he affects the story here, right? Like the other characters are started somewhat undefined, right? And so they get to be defined by Dunnsmouth in some way, right? Whereas like Jurek stands a little bit apart. But what I like that happened yesterday was there was a moment when we were having kind of a meta conversation, and I was saying, okay, look, we've got mystery A, mystery B, and mystery C, and they are not connected to each other. Like they are three different things, and you can each go pursue whichever you wish, but just know that they're three different things. And what I like is what you did yesterday was you made a proposition of like, well, how about mystery C is actually really tightly connected to my character's sort of mission. He's there to kind of cleanse the land of some evil, right? And that actually, that evil is actually, mystery B is kind of sent into the world by this great evil. In addition, it sent into the world the thing that like, that fucked up my clan back home, which is why I'm here to kill it, right? So I just like that you kind of like open this conversation up to sort of change my preconceived ideas about what was going on in the setting, right? In order to sort of more tightly integrate it into your character. I thought it was a good move. And I think that conversation is so important at the table, right? Because it just makes sure we're all going to get to a conclusion that we're satisfied with.
Yeah, I think depending on what game you're playing, people lose sight of all games being a conversation, and if you want to get like what you can out of the game, you're gonna have to articulate what it is that you want out of it to the person running it, right, and to your players.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So,
no, it was good, and I think and it shows a certain level of like I hope there's a part of me that like hopes it's a function of like how I run my table, right? That like you felt comfortable doing that, right? But it's definitely something that I think like should be like a thing that GMs strive to encourage at their table, right? Like encourage your players to like take ownership of the setting and get invested in it, and to propose alternative sort of narrative arcs, right? So, well, awesome. Do you have anything else you want to say about Scenic Dunnsmouth?
No, I just wanted to hit that again. Yeah, I think you definitely purposely will pull out of the fiction and be like, how's everybody doing kind of thing, right? And that's important. So I think you're completely right that it came from how you were running your table.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thanks. Well, okay, let's just go ahead and go on to the next segment then.
Our next segment is What Should I Be on the Lookout For? Listeners, this week we've got something a little different for you. We've got Scott Selvidge, who is one of our competitors in the Compendium Class contest, and he has something for us to be on the lookout for. What do you have for us, Scott?
Yeah, I've been working on a project that I call the Arcane Compendium at the moment. It's going to have a longer list of spells for arcane spellcasters to use in Dungeon World that I converted over from D&D spells. It's also going to have a specialist wizard compendium class. There's going to be converted playbooks for the wizard and cleric also, because I also include a new mana system to cast spells in Dungeon World. That uses like a resource system instead of the spells per day that normal stuff uses, because I'm a gamer and I like the mana system that they use in video games and things, so I wanted to take a stab at doing that for Dungeon World.
Okay, nice. So is this like a supplement to the wizard base class, or is this like a replacement for it, or how do you see people using it?
The moves that the wizard has already, they don't need a lot of altering for it. The mana system's pretty light, and it just completely changes how them and the other class that cast spells, how they work for the spell part of it anyway, not the rest of their class. The rest of their class is pretty similar after.
How are you planning on getting that out to folks?
I haven't really decided yet. It'll most likely be drive-through RPG once I get that ready. And I have considered Patreon, but I'm not sure how I would go about that yet. So most likely drive-through RPG.
Gotcha. Yeah, that sounds like that could be a pretty great addition. Do you see it as kind of like a blending of the wizard and the mage? Like you have more flexibility with that since you have more spells, or is it still more like the wizard where you have these spells and you have to prepare them in your book?
Well, it's more like it is like worded still that the wizard is preparing his spells, but you're using this mana resource that goes up as you get higher in your levels. I don't know how to sum it up without giving everything away about it. You get that, like in the end of it, like with playtesting and stuff, it seems like you get more flexibility to cast your spells, but because you still have the normal take a -1 forward to your spellcasting until you repair them again or get yourself in danger. But then there's also that other option of losing your resource. So if you lose your resource, then you won't be able to cast some of your higher level spells if you lose too much of it.
Okay, gotcha. That's really interesting. I like that it kind of mechanically enforces like you can't do these really high level difficult spells because you've exhausted too much of whatever the magic is that you have. It's some kind of magical fatigue.
Yeah, and like it's written, like so far the mana. You can call it whatever you want to, but it's just that's the base of it. Like if you were a cleric, you may not call it that. You may call it like favor or something that your deity is giving you. That's walking into cleric. That's another thing I had to think about too, because clerics usually have access to all of their spells, and the way that my mana system worked, it's like that make them really powerful if they can just have access to everything and use this mana system. So they will be a little bit different in the way that they have their spells. It'll be more of a, as you gain levels, your god gives you access to more spells, so that it's a little bit more even between them and wizards.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. It's a good call on that portion.
Yeah. I didn't want them just casting Storm of Vengeance all day whenever they get to level 9.
Right. Awesome. Well, is there anything else that you wanted to let listeners know about it?
Only that it will also contain like some magic items and stuff, and some like regular items that deal with mana as well. Like there's some incense that I used as an item that it helps you, I think, regain mana or something without having to go full on and do your preparing. I think you can just light the incense for a few minutes and get a little bit back or something like that. I can't remember exactly just things like that.
Okay, cool. Some good magic items to go with the new rules.
Yeah.
Awesome. Let's move on to our next segment.
Okay.
Our next segment is What Here Is Not What It Appears to Be. Listeners, this week we've got another special guest, Michael, who is here to talk with us a little bit about something that he thinks is not what it appears to be. Michael, what do you have for us this week?
Hey guys, so I'm going to be talking a little bit about alignment, as it's seen on the core playbook sheets. I think that one of the really cool things about PBTA is that, or any Powered by the Apocalypse game, is that when you look at a playbook, that kind of gives you an idea of what the game is about and what you're playing. So I think that taking a close eye at the elements that are on the play sheets is probably a good thing to do to kind of get a grasp of the game. And one of the things that's at the top of the page for each playbook is alignment.
Yeah, so what do you have in mind here? I feel like the alignments as they stand right now really generally dig at some tropes and push players towards some tropey kinds of things. Some are infinitely easier than others. That's probably my biggest beef with them.
Oh my god,
Yeah.
that's so true. If you take the wizard and you have the one that's discover something about a magical mystery, you get that XP at the end every goddamn session. It's impossible not to get that one.
Yeah, but then if you take the one where the ranger has to free somebody from figurative or literal bonds,
that one's impossible.
Right.
Yeah, that one's so
Right.
unless there is someone figuratively bonded, it's really difficult. Yeah.
Yeah, and the barbarian one is kind of weird too. One of them is I think it's a shoe, a convention of society, of civilization.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
That one can be super fun if the barbarian player is very cognizant of it and very proactively trying to hit it. But it also ends up being the problem with alignments. I don't want to derail the conversation here, but I feel like the main problem with alignments is most people forget about them, right? They are written on the paper, and it's just like a checkbox at the end of the session. Oh, did you do that thing? Okay, awesome.
Yeah. So, and when I look at games, it's when I see elements like that, do we really pay attention to that? Part of me just thinks, well, let's just excise that from the page. And I think that's totally an option that you can take with Dungeon World. If you decide, well, we don't really worry about carry weight, right? Well, you could just cut that off the page and not worry about it. If you don't really care about alignment, that's fine too. But I think one interesting thing that the Dungeon World book talks about is what they think of alignment, and they suggest that it's a core belief that has mystical properties. So that's why, for example, every paladin has the ability to ask what here is evil. They mean a mystical evil that's inside of you, not a philosophical understanding or anything like that. And that's also why the thief has a move that's you can tell anybody whatever your alignment is, So if that's what your game is about, the good exists in the world and evil exists in the world, I think that's a cool thing to have. But I know there's lots of people who don't run games that way.
Well, I think the biggest issue with alignment in Dungeon World, apart from the fact that like people tend to just forget about that alignment statement and just kind of roleplay their characters, however, is it comes from D&D, right? Like it's a holdover from D&D. It's one of the things that made Dungeon World so popular because they had so many of those easily identifiable D&D things, right? And but the difference is in D&D, alignment seems to mean a lot more than I think it does in Dungeon World, okay? In D&D, there are spells that are implicated by alignment. There are certain things you can't do unless you're of a certain alignment. And then, particularly in first edition, AD&D, the alignments, like, or this idea of like law versus chaos and all that stuff, like it means a lot in the fiction, right? Like in terms of like all the monsters, in terms of like the different planes of existence, like it actually has like a lot more... it has both a lot more mechanical weight and a lot more sort of like setting weight in D&D. And I don't think that's the case in Dungeon World. I know there's that thief thing that lets you like say whatever alignment you want to be. And there's like the paladin thing. I get that. But for the most part, though, there's not much in the game, I don't think, that really like forces your hand on alignment or implicates alignment, other than just like maybe giving you a prompt of how to play your character. Am I wrong there? Does that sound right?
I think you're absolutely correct, but I do think that as a game master or player, you could push that angle. Like with David's Engelkite game, you know, true evil might be something that's more present, or in like a planar hopping game, you might go to the plane of evil, which is literally evil, you know. But I think for most people, it's probably a good idea to look at some alternatives. And I know when you guys replaced bonds with flags, I thought that was personally an improvement. And I think that, you know, that there's something you could do with alignment as well. Inverse World is a supplement. Yeah, well, in their playbooks, they offer an alternative to alignment called drives. And again, it's basically the same thing. You know, if you check this box, you get an XP at the end. But theirs kind of follow this basic format of, instead of, you know, are you good or evil or chaotic or neutral, what drives you to X is the basic template for that, which I think can be really interesting. So, for example, if you're a fighter, what drives you to fight? If you're a wizard, what drives you to study magic, you know? And I think that that's a question that is a little bit more practical, has a little bit more things you can hang your tropes on.
A lot of people don't like this sort of like very cookie cutter, almost binary way that alignment defines characters, right? Like, it seems almost simplistic, right? And so I've seen those drives on some of the playbooks, on other playbooks that have done that. That Bard one I talked about a few episodes ago. That one uses drives, if I recall correctly. I think there's a certain like flexibility there in how you like. There's a certain flexibility, and I think it's a little more of a realistic proposition than like I am chaotic, I am evil, I am lawful.
Yeah, I really am into that because it invites the player to have a more meaningful decision. I honestly, like, now that you've brought it to my attention, I would probably leave it until the end of session 1 before I'd say, and then write your drive. So that way you kind of lived in your character a little bit. But yeah, like I kind of like it. And it doesn't like necessarily step on any like alignment type of question, like, oh, my character's evil and your character is good, how do we get along? Like, we don't have to like deal with that. It's more ambiguous.
It's so stupid to the point where like it just gets ignored, right? Like, how many DW parties have you had where like there are people with totally polar opposite alignments, and that hasn't really been a factor in like how the characters interact, right? Or if it has been, it's your interactions with that character have been, it's more nuanced and more complex than just like, I am evil, I am good, right?
The majority of stories I've heard about alignment have typically been horror stories. You know,
well, especially like a lot of the old D&D type stories when you hear about like, I mean, well, anyway, okay, well, so, all right, so drives are one way of addressing the situation. I like drives a lot. I think drives are great, and I have a sneaking suspicion that if there's ever going to be a second edition of Dungeon World, they'll probably replace some of these D&D holdovers with stuff like that, right? Like, that's just my intuition, because I don't think the DW community really gives a shit about alignment, right? Like, I never get the impression that anyone is like married to the idea of alignment. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I don't expect to have a whole lot of backlash about saying that we should drop alignment.
Right. It seems like so uncontroversial just to say, you know what, let's just not do that and let's just do something different, right?
Yeah, I think that it's served its purpose of being a familiar thing for people who are not familiar with Dungeon World, but are familiar with other traditional style dungeon crawler games, to draw them in. That purpose has been served. People know what Dungeon World is now.
Exactly, right. I think that's going to be the most interesting thing about DW2E whenever that happens, if it happens, is seeing some of those like D&D tropes fall away in place of something different, right? I think that's going to be super, super interesting, but I feel like that's a separate conversation. Yeah, I mean, I think, so what do you guys think? Do you think this is something that like, what do you guys think about, instead of having like predetermined drives on the playbooks, or like that maybe that you've selected as a GM or whatever, what do you think about letting the players write their own? And do you think there should be guidelines on that?
I almost don't know. I think that answering the question is really not too difficult. Like David said, I think that asking the question at the end of a session would be a really great idea. I will say, however, that I do appreciate how quick character generation in Dungeon World can be. Like, here's your playbook, go. And if you have a blank there, that might be difficult without some examples. You're adding about 10 more
minutes to character creation, aren't
you?
Yeah,
flags take longer than bonds. It's true.
Yeah, flags do too. Yeah, flags.
And drives, if you're writing them yourself, would take longer than an alignment. Check the box.
I think the payoff is worth it, though. I'm going to say the payoff is worth it. I love the way flags drive play at my table, and and honestly, like this idea of drives or beliefs or whatever you want to call them, beliefs always comes to mind for me because this very much echoes Burning Wheel, right? I mean, this is like Burning Wheel sort of gave us this idea in a lot of ways, this idea of like, I'm a character who believes in something, or I'm motivated by a certain thing and I'm pushing towards that, right? And I get a mechanical cookie if I do it.
Right.
I think the payoff is worth it. And what I love about it is these drives and beliefs is they're kind of like they're just the inverse of flags, right? I mean, flags are like, come interact with my character in this way because I think this is a cool way to interact with my character. And drives are, I'm going to interact with the world in this way because this is what I like about my character, right?
Yeah, that's actually what I was just about to say, is that they were like the inverse. And in the myth of the Dungeon World second ed, they would all be one block for me, Write one thing that you will do and write like two things that you want other people to do with you.
Agreed 100%. Yeah. Cool. Well, that was good. Yeah. I mean, I think it's a conversation worth having, especially if you are part of the DW community and you're like a lot of other Dungeon World players and GMs, you're constantly quote unquote improving or upgrading the system, right? Which I think happens a lot right in the DW community, which I think is a reflection of how much people love it. Not that the game is broken, right? I think it's a legit conversation to have. I think, and I tend to agree. I'm not so like, I need to fix alignment or I need to change alignment right now in my games, because I find that flags drive the play pretty well at this point. And to me, the alignments they're almost incidental in my games. I mean, you've both played in my games, and I don't ever remember having like any interesting conversations about alignment at the table before. Just like we get to the end and maybe we use the time to mark alignment just to kind of reflect on what happened in the session, like, oh yeah, that happened or that happened, but it never really feels like it's driving play to me.
Yeah, it's a little vestigial, but it sometimes helps players advance a little quicker, which I'm personally a fan of characters getting new levels. It's exciting for me, even when I'm not the character getting the new level.
Right, yeah. I do think I know, like, I have players who, like, I can see that they are trying to check that box every session, like I can see that they're doing it, but I don't think the conversations that come out of alignment have been as rich. But I think maybe replacing it with something is really a good idea, maybe long term, right?
Well, awesome. That's that was a good topic. Let's go ahead and move on to our next segment.
This episode of Discern Realities is being sponsored by Scablands Press and their game, The Indie Hack. So this week, listeners, I have a couple of Indie Hack related announcements for you. The first is that we are going to be producing an actual play series, we being the Gauntlet. We're going to produce an actual play series of the Indie Hack for our Comic Strip AP podcast. This is going to be short form actual play of the Indie Hack. It's going to be run by Slade himself. Slade's the author of the of the game, and I think you're going to really like it. I've heard the first couple of episodes, and it's really, really cool. It's going to give you a really good sense of how the game works, and I'm pretty excited about it. The second thing I want to tell you about is I'm going to be running 3 sessions of the Indie Hack for Gauntlet Hangouts. Now, that in and of itself is not super interesting, but we're going to be doing them this time over YouTube streaming, which means you will have an opportunity, if you wish, to come watch us run the game in real time, which makes me a little nervous. But that's going to be March 12th, March 19th, and March 26th at 10 a.m. Eastern. The links will be available on our Patreon page. It's going to be on the public Patreon page. So you don't have to be a Patreon supporter to get those links. But if you want to stay a while, I won't complain. I'm going to be running the Indie Hack. I'm going to be using a module called Blood in the Chocolate by Kyle Chenier. It's a Lamentations of the Flame Princess module that is a sort of twisted take on Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. Anyway, I'm pretty excited about it. I love the Indie Hack's flexibility. I was able to run my old Dungeon World stuff in it like really easily a while back, and I'm really excited to see how it goes with this like sort of OSR module essentially that's kind of made for sort of D&D type games. So I think it's going to be great. So be on the lookout for that. And if the Indie Hack sounds good to you, definitely go to DriveThru. Check out, there's the full version of the game. There's also the abbreviated version of the game that comes with a little adventure called Noises in the Old Theater. And you can also look at the system reference document, which has the most like sort of core rules of the game on the Scablands Press website. Thanks again to Scablands, and let's get back to the show.
Our next segment is what here is useful or valuable to me.
All right, as we have indicated earlier in the show, we have decided on the runners-up and winner of our Compendium Class contest, and we're going to talk to each of them in turn about their Compendium Class, and we're going to start with Fraser. So it's just me and Fraser for this first part. So, Fraser, your Compendium Class that I chose as my runner-up, David and I each chose one, and then we mutually agreed on the winner. Mm-hmm. Your Compendium Class, the Sundered. Let's read it first, and then I'm going to say why I liked it. Okay.
Okay.
The Sundered. I'll read the intro text. Whensoever you do something or witness something that irrevocably alters your sense of self, you are forever changed, revealing your true nature. Your memories come back in a torrent. They claw and scrape at your mind, gaining only partial leverage on your fragile psyche. For now. What is clear is this. You are not one of them. You never were and may never be. You fell from another existence into this one, and when this happened, you sundered your past from yourself. Now that past wishes to become present, and as it does, who you are now is slowly being overridden. Did you belong to another plane? Are you the ghost or reincarnation of someone or something past? Why and how did you come to be here, and how have you changed? The mystery is yours to unravel. So, Fraser, what's the intro move?
The intro move is at the start of the session, rule plus con. On a 10 plus, the DM holds 2. On a 7 to 9, the DM holds 1. They may spend this hold 1 for 1 during a session in order to do one of the following. The DM can also opt to give you any of the hold to another player during the course of the session, but never you. They can give you a fleeting memory from your past. It gives you +1 or -1 forward, as they so choose. Tell you something your other self wants you to do or say, and if you do it, mark XP. And when you roll a miss, take temporary control over you as your other self.
And you may then take the following moves. And that starter move is called Fractured, by the way. You may then take the following moves. Educe. Whenever you discern your reality, you may also tell everyone how the person or situation elicits a forgotten memory from who you used to be in an attempt to unravel the mystery of who or what you were before.
And Fervent. The first time you speak to someone earnestly about the events that sundered you, or what is currently happening to your sense of self, you may ask them any one question in regards to it, and they must answer truthfully.
Congruent. This replaces Educe. When you reveal enough about your other self to know its nature, take any move, advanced or otherwise, from any class, so long as the GM and you pick it together. So what I love about this compendium class is I love the play that it encourages, okay? So in story games, I'm a big fan of what is called emergent mystery, and there are games that are really good exemplars of this, like Run, Society of Dreamers, and some others. I love games where the characters have a past and we have mechanical enforcement that allows us to discover that past. So this CC is like really, really like catnip to me, like in terms of like how I like to play. And I don't know if you had the inside line on that or not, Fraser. I know we've talked about it before, but I love mechanics that encourage you to explore your character's past and to reveal mysteries, right? And encourages everybody at the table to sort of get in on that conversation too. I just think that's really, really fun play, and it's great. And I think you can do that no matter what. Like, you don't need a compendium class to like explore your character, but I like that there are some mechanical inducements to it here. So I guess like my question for you, Fraser, is like, what were you thinking when you put this one together?
So I have a similar kind of playbook in my game, The Veil, which is the attached, where it's sort of like we all have the player that like wants to participate, but is really kind of like mousy, and they don't want to or can't like know the genre and get into it. So this is sort of like a prompt for the person running the game to be like, okay, well, how about this? And then if they are really digging on it, then you go with it. And if not, then you'll find out that during play, it's sort of, it helps them a lot because they get the carrot right away when they're like, oh, if I do this thing and I find out more about my character, I get XP, and it's not just, like when I fail or at the end when I kill stuff. This is really helping me figure out something, and it's also sort of like I tried to keep it very broad so they could kind of come up with whatever, and probably when they choose this, they'll have a conversation with the facilitator, and then the facilitator will get some ideas and try to pass it on to them, and it'll be like them working in tandem instead of this person sort of maybe floundering a little bit.
Oh, so that's super interesting, because I never would have thought like, oh, this is a thing that's going to help like the more the more shy player at the table or the less confident player at the table like explore their character kind of in real time or like in the middle of the game. That's kind of a cool idea though, right? I mean, I'm a big fan anyway of people not coming to the table with their characters totally preloaded and backstoried up, right? I fucking hate that shit. I hate it. Like it's so anathema to how I like to play role-playing games. And so I never thought of it that way, but that actually makes a lot of sense. Like I kind of get that, right? I like it just from like I just like the mystery of it, right? Like I just like the idea of like we got this character at the table that we don't know anything about, or we know as players what they think they are, right? But but there's like this lingering thing in the background that as players we know is the truth, and that just seems like so much fun to explore. I could even like honestly, I could even see you like using this compendium class to do for all of the characters, right? Like all the characters have this compendium class, and they all start together like we are all brought together for ostensible reason X, right? But then we're all going to learn that we're really like, this is the real truth of why we're all together, right? Like this is the truth. And I kind of fucking love that. Like I think it's really good. I don't think the CC is perfect, don't get me wrong. Like I would change a couple things on it. Like I'd make some of the moves a little more powerful just to encourage people to take them. But I thematically, conceptually, I really love it.
Yeah, my moves are always like either super overpowered or super underpowered, and it's right. All like to keep like with the theme, but also I really like moves that bring a lot to the fiction, even if it doesn't give mechanical benefits.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, some people just aren't. They're like, well, why would I ever do this? It doesn't give me plus
when
one
I can do this thing over here,
yeah.
right? Well, that's I guess kind of like the way the moves are written. you can kind of tell that you've written other PBTA games because the way the moves are written, like these moves would be like perfect for Monster Hearts or something, right? Like where like quote unquote power level is not really a concern, right? Like, so they make sense in that context. For Dungeon World specifically though, like there are so many competing moves whenever you level up, right? It's like there's a choice that has to be made, right? So, but I don't think it would take much. I mean, maybe like throw a +1 here or there on something and call it a day. But
for sure. Yeah.
But this is super awesome. So thanks so much for sharing that with the contest. I really enjoyed it. Is there anything else you want to say about it?
No, I'm just like I'm a big fan of any kind of playbook that brings more fiction to the table than what we had before. And especially with this one where you're just like, oh, like who knows what we are and we'll just figure it out, right? As this fiction progresses, we'll find out the right reason for that. We don't need to know it right now. And it's also kind of my way of like, pick this and just play. Right?
Awesome. Cool. All right, well, let's go see what David picked for his runner-up.
All right, now for my runner-up to the Compendium Class contest, I have Scott, who we introduced earlier for listeners. Scott wrote just a whole bunch of Compendium classes and put them in a really nice PDF format where they're all very uniform. And one was very near and dear to my heart, as it was actually something that I had been toying with the idea of trying to make it, and I couldn't figure out a way that it would really pull off. But I'm really, really think that it's cool what you did with this, Scott. Do you want to introduce that Compendium class for us?
Sure. It's the Monster Hunter. I know what most people will probably think whenever they see Monster Hunter. They'll associate it with the video games or something, but I've never actually played them. I just kind of know that you hunt monsters in them and make things out of them. But this was inspired by me and my friend just talking about how the monsters in Dungeon World, like, they should be more useful whenever you kill them, and instead of just rolling the treasure table, because you normally just come up with gold and it's like, okay, well, this beholder or whatever just dropped 500 gold worth of gems. Like it seemed kind of silly, so this was more of a you loot their parts and use them for things type of class or compendium.
Yeah, like it totally works for that. Or if you're like me and you thought that it came from the video game, it really does like a lot of the same things that the video game does that I like.
Okay.
So this is the Monster Hunter Compendium class. When you have taken the time to learn about the different properties of monsters and the benefits of creating items from their remains, you may choose the monster lore move when you gain a level.
Yeah, and monster lore. When you discern realities about a monster, whether living or dead, in order to determine what parts of it might be beneficial in crafting an item you wish to create, you may take +1 to the roll. Also, when you ask what here is useful or valuable to me about the monster, the GM will tell you what part or parts of it can be used and what traits they will give to the item you craft. Once you take the monster lore move, you can take any of the following moves after that, whenever you gain a level.
Beast Crafter. You have gained the materials, now you must use them. When you begin crafting an item from a monster's remains, describe the parts of the monster you are using and the way the item looks. Then roll plus wisdom. On a 10+, you may create 2 traits with the GM for your item in addition to the normal attributes it would get for its type. On a 7 and 9, you may create 1 trait with the GM. On a 6-, also create 1 trait, but the GM will also create a drawback for its shoddy craftsmanship. And then you got some examples that are pretty nice there. In the end, the traits and drawbacks are only limited by the GM. Also, you can always try to make a new item if you create one that is not what you were hoping for, at least as long as you can find more of that monster.
Of course. If it's the only, one-eyed, one-horned, flying purple people eater, you can't find another eye of it, right? Talisman is the next move. When you have time to work with the remains of a monster, you can use enough of its less valuable parts to make a talisman of that monster. While you wear a monster's talisman, monsters of that type cannot sense you unless they can see you, and you gain +1 armor against their attacks. However, the powerful scent may draw the attention of other creatures.
Bane. When you craft a weapon from the remains of a monster with the Beast Crafter move, the weapon always gains the Bane trait in addition to the traits you gain from the roll, which causes it to ignore the armor of the monster of the same type.
Yeah, that's a pretty good one.
That's pretty good. Yeah, I like that.
The next one is a Legendary Hunter. When you have 3 or more items made from one type of monster and you encounter a monster of the same type, take +1 ongoing against it.
Trap Master. When you attempt to lay a trap for a monster, describe what it looks like and what it does and roll +Wisdom. On a 10+, choose 2. On a 7 to 9, choose 1. Your trap works well, hindering the monster in some way, giving you and your companions +1 forward against it. The trap does not accidentally ensnare or hinder one of your allies during the conflict. The trap disables one of the monster's moves. The GM will describe how.
The next one is Apex Predator. Whenever you encounter a predatory monster that would normally make you their prey, you may roll +Con. On a 10+, it seems to acknowledge your prowess and leaves you alone, going on its way. On a 7 to 9, it initiates a threatening display and will only attack if further provoked.
Nice, and then you have a page to write down all of the crafted items.
Yeah, that's a theme in a lot of my compendium classes and stuff, is there's always room for either notes or something concerning the class itself at the end.
Yeah. The formatting on this is like, it looks so good, and all of yours like are very similarly formatted, so they all look like they're a part of a neat collection. But this one was definitely my favorite.
Yeah, I plan on possibly making a compendium later.
Like, this is like a compendium class that would just, like, I could see every single one of my players taking it and really centering an entire story around hunting monsters and trying to make things to take care of a larger monster. And that's essentially what you do in Monster Hunter, the video game. So, and like the traps, like that's a big part of the game. So like the fact that you did not write this with the intent that it would be like that game is just like mind blowing to me.
I just want to make something cool, and monster hunting is cool to me, and a lot of my players, they really enjoy it, and it's just this helps them a lot more. And I've really only had one of my players actually play this compendium class so far, and really I think the only things he took were monster lore and apex predator, because he just was this big half giant and he wanted to be able to intimidate the monsters he came across.
Nice. Man, he didn't take beast crafter. Like, I'd be making weapons left and right out of that.
He did not, but there was too much going on, I think, in that game for him to worry about it.
Nice. I'm probably going to, in the semi-near future, I've kind of committed to running Angle Kite through its course, but I'm probably going to take a minute and play just some, like, monster hunting dungeon world, because I love it so much.
Oh, yeah. Awesome. It's totally fun. And I know you'll have to let me know how that turns out.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. You'll probably hear about it on the show.
Okay.
as I tend to talk about those kinds of things on here.
The what happened recently.
Exactly. Congratulations on being the runner-up, and thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, is there anything else that you wanted to share with listeners?
I'm going to have a lot more compendium classes at some point. Right now, my most recent ones were racial compendium classes for the Centaur, Minotaur, and Satyr races. Basically just compendiums you can take from the very start and replace your race move with one of their moves. And then you can just keep taking moves from it as you level up if you want. But then there's a lot more, as David and Jason probably found out as they had to read through all of them. But
we had to read so many. No, it's great. Thank you for participating.
Thank you for having the contest.
Listeners, we are here once again with Michael, who is our winner of this Compendium Class contest. Congratulations.
Yay! I'm so excited.
It's been a long road to get here. Lots and lots of Compendium Classes written and read.
Lots of Compendium Classes. Yeah. Now that we're all together, I want to just say really quickly, because we did get lots of submissions for this contest. I don't remember the final number, but it was many. And that's why it also took us a little bit of time to get through them and choose the winners and runners up. But there were so many interesting and cool things that like on display for this contest. They were like I felt like there were two like distinct strains of Compendium Class. There were some people who did Compendium Classes that seemed like a very common sort of thing that you might encounter in a setting, and they were answering a problem, right? Like
very utilitarian.
But I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean, like, it's like they put a lot of thought into, okay, if I had a character who was like a ship rat, that was one of the CCs, a ship rat, right? Or like a deckhand on a ship. Like, what kinds of moves would that be? There was a lot of like just really, really like you could tell like a lot of like deep and precise thinking going on about like, how do I translate this very, very common sort of like thing into a Compendium Class and make it useful and fun. So that was pretty cool. So we had a lot of entries like that. And those were really great. And it's like stuff I would use. Like I would totally like take some of those and put them on my table, right? Like they were just so universally usable. That was super cool. And then we had others were very the other track of Compendium Classes were like really strange and just really far out and like really, really fictionally specific, and so like, for example, our sponsor Slade, he sent one in, and
oh my god,
it was so bizarre. It was so specific and so bizarre.
Yeah, it was like you were like some kind of automaton that's got these different kinds of fluids that had really scientific sounding names, that
like this lung thing
that could burn in your core
or something. It was cool, but it was really strange.
It's really evocative. Yeah.
I hope you guys are going to release those, because that sounds pretty cool.
Yeah, it was pretty awesome. And then we had like, and then some used like totally different mechanics. Like I think it was Dwayne Summerfield. He had one that was like, you had like this drawing of a glass of water on your sheet.
Oh yeah.
It was like your cup half full, cup half empty, or glass half empty.
Glass could get bigger and smaller, and like you could put different dice in the cup, and they were like swap out dice.
It all kind of represented your fate or your luck or something, like I can't remember all the details, but so there was just a lot of like really unique and cool thinking going on in that regard as well. So it really covered the gamut of like submission types. I was super pleased with it. And so just to everybody who participated in the contest, David and I were just like, we were bewildered with like how awesome all this stuff was, and like we had a really hard time going through them and making our decisions. But we ended on Michael's Compendium Class, The Revenant, which we actually read really early in the contest on air. David and I just both kept going back to this one. It was the one I think that just really stuck out for us. Why don't we go ahead and read it for now? So Michael, just read the intro text and the starting move for it.
Absolutely. When you have passed beyond the Black Gate, with revenge still burning in your heart, erupt from your shallow grave and grasp vengeance. So you may take this move immediately upon your resurrection. It's called Spirit of Vengeance. You have lost your sense of identity, but have been granted a supernatural endurance. Erase your character's name and add 10 to your total hit points.
If you are the Spirit of Vengeance, these count as class moves for you. You can choose from them when you level up. And the first advanced move is Vendetta. Your soul is guided by a solitary purpose. Erase your character's alignment and race and add this question to the Discern Realities list. What is the quickest route to revenge? When you act on the answer, in addition to gaining a +1 forward, you mark XP.
Solitary Undertaking. Your allies only get in the way of your mission. When you roll a 6-, you may erase one of your character's bonds and treat the result as a 7 or 9.
Vengeful Visage. Your appearance is twisted by your strong desire. When you parlay, you don't need leverage if you erase one description of your look.
Ultimate Vengeance. The moment you have been waiting for is finally here. When vengeance is at hand, you may successfully acquire it. Nothing will stand in your way. Destroy your character sheet, preferably with fire, and describe with great relish how your character achieves ultimate vengeance. Keep in mind, sometimes the best revenge is a life well lived. I love this so much. Like I just love this playbook. I love this CC so much. We've talked about it a little bit already, like on the show before. So I don't, we don't have to like. We'll just be maybe kind of rehashing old ground here. But David, like, why was your winner, David? Like, why did you choose this winner?
All right, so this is a really unique take on a compendium class. Everything in it makes a lot of sense as you slowly destroy your playbook because you are the living dead. Like, that just makes so much sense to me that would be like what's happening, but I never would have thought of it myself. Yeah,
I love this sort of I love this marriage between like the in fiction and the meta. Like it's so tight and so symbolic and significant, right? It just feels fun. Like I just imagine I'd be having so much fun with this at the table.
This was like something from 10 Candles and something from Society of Dreamers, which are like some games that I really, really dig, but like doing things in Dungeon World.
Yeah. This sense that like this idea that like what's happening like as a meta condition at the table like has some bearing on the fiction, right? Like it's got that. It's just this cool like it's not something we see in Dungeon World, right? Like it's unheard of in Dungeon World, and I just really fucking loved it. So Michael, what was your thinking when you made the compendium class?
Well, I am so pleased that you guys like it because this kind of came out of nowhere. I wish I could tell you like what my thought process was because it was just like a runaway train of, oh, I could do this and oh, that'd be cool. So yeah. But a couple things I did have in mind. Definitely, I thought symbolism was important. I really like when the story that you tell in games has some symbolic meaning about life or anything like that. So I was kind of going for like the effects that revenge and like the desire for revenge could like have in one's life. And I think that that's seen with things like, your friends, you lose some friends, and that's kind of like when you erase the bond. So, but also again, I was just looking at elements on the character sheet that you maybe wouldn't realize you miss until they're gone, and might give them some more importance. Yeah. And also the final thing that kind of tied it all together was this idea that sometimes you're telling a story in Dungeon World and then your character dies. and you have like this plot thread of, oh, I need to go kill the evil king. Oh, but I'm dead. And I thought that this could be a way for a game master to offer that character to come back and finish that story. But at the end of it, your character's still dead and we got to tell the story of a new person. So that's kind of, I always had in my mind at the end that your character sheet is going to be removed somehow because you can't keep going on as a zombie forever, fictionally. But yeah, that's kind of how it ended up.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Michael. And thank you all listeners for submitting and participating in this Compendium Class contest. It was an amazing thing, and be on the lookout for some more contests in the future. Let's go ahead and move on to our next segment. That just leaves one final question. Who's really in control here?
We are a production of the Gauntlet gaming community. Our website is gauntlet-rpg.com. We also have a really terrific G+ community. Just search for the Gauntlet. We are on Twitter at GauntletRPG, and if you'd like to support us on Patreon, we'd love that. It's patreon.com/gauntlet. Right now, if you pledge at the $4 level, you get access to our zine, Codex. The current issue is Codex Love, which includes lots of cool Dungeon World stuff.
Awesome. Thanks, Jason.
Thanks, David.
Thanks, listeners. That's our show.